O great spirits of our ancestors, hear our prayers and guide us.
In Africa, names are never random. They are prayers, prophecies, contracts with God, ancestors, and destiny itself. To call someone by name is not simply to identify them, it is to remind them of their origin, their covenant, and their path. A name is a living sentence, a spoken prophecy carried on the tongue of the community, a word charged with spirit that follows its bearer from cradle to grave. It is why, in African thought, the question is never merely, what is your name? But what power speaks through your name? Across the vast continent, from the Nile Valley of Kemet to the forests of the Igbo, from the shrines of the Yoruba to the Akan of Ghana, from the Congo Basin to the Zulu Plains, and among the Vodun peoples of West Africa, names have always been invocations of the divine. They call on God in different languages with different rhythms, but they speak with one voice. Whether it is Chi or Chukwu, Olua or Orisha, Nyame or Asaseya, Nzambi, Nkulunkulu, Mawu-Lisa, or Ra and Amun, the ancestors understood that a name was a bridge between humanity and the realm of spirit. To name a child was to bind that child to cosmic law, to place them under the guardianship of higher forces, and to announce to the world that this life is not random, but sacred. The act of naming then was never trivial. It was a ritual, a ceremony, a deliberate invocation of destiny. Every name carried meaning. Every syllable carried weight. To say the name was to activate its prayer. To dishonor the name was to dishonor the ancestors and the divine powers it invoked. This is why names were chosen with care, often after consultation with priests, diviners, or elders who understood the mysteries of language and the currents of fate. A name was both identity and shield, both prophecy and reminder. And so, as we uncover the spiritual meaning of African names, we are not merely learning about history or tradition. We are listening to the voice of Africa itself, echoing across generations, whispering through syllables the eternal truths that life is guided, protected, and sanctified by the divine. If your name carries the weight of your ancestors, if it speaks of God's presence or destiny's promise, then you already know this truth. Like this video if your name carries ancestral power, and comment below with the story of your own name, because in that story lies the echo of Africa's wisdom. To understand the spiritual meaning of names in Africa, we must first step into the cosmology that gave birth to them. In African thought, nothing exists in isolation. Life is not a random occurrence, but part of a vast web woven by God, ancestors, nature, and destiny. Within this worldview, a name is never a mere label. It is a declaration of belonging, a statement of purpose, and a covenant that ties the bearer to forces greater than themselves. To name someone is to call forth their essence, to anchor their spirit in the world, and to align their journey with the rhythms of creation. African societies have long understood that identity is inseparable from destiny. A child is not simply born, they arrive carrying the breath of ancestors and the spark of divine intention. The name given to that child is a compass pointing toward their path. In the Igbo world, for example, to carry a name that begins with Chi or Chukwu is to carry a reminder that God is always present in your destiny. Among the Yoruba, to be called Oluwaseun is to live every day with the testimony that the Lord is worthy of thanks. To the Akan, being named after the day of your birth is not random, but a placement within cosmic order, binding you to forces that govern time itself. In each case, the name is not a passive marker, but an active force shaping how the person sees themselves and how the community relates to them. This is why names are often described as contracts. They are agreements between the living, the divine, and the ancestral realm. To name a child is to present them to God and the ancestors. To say, This one belongs to the covenant of life and their path is under divine guardianship. Names bind individuals to their lineage, affirm their place in the community, and invoke blessings that will follow them through the seasons of their lives. In this sense, names are both protection and responsibility. They protect because they carry divine energy, and they demand responsibility because to dishonor the name is to dishonor the power that it invokes. The metaphysics of naming ceremonies demonstrates this truth vividly. In many African traditions, a child is not immediately named at birth. Instead, there is a waiting period, often days, sometimes even weeks, during which diviners consult the spiritual world. Elders pour libations, calling upon the ancestors to reveal the destiny of the child. The family prepares offerings to harmonize the child's spirit with the community and the land. Only when the correct alignment is perceived is the name given, spoken aloud for the first time in the presence of witnesses both seen and unseen. In Yoruba traditions, this ceremony may include placing symbolic items before the child. Honey for sweetness, kola nut for wisdom, salt for preservation, each element tied to the prayer embedded in the chosen name. In Igbo culture, libations may be poured to Chi and Chukwu, asking that the child's name reflect divine purpose. Among the Akan, the child may be presented to the earth goddess, Asase Ya, ensuring that the name carries the balance of nature and spirit. These ceremonies reveal that naming is not about convenience but about destiny. The name chosen is believed to shape the child's future, guiding their steps and protecting their paths. This philosophy reflects a profound understanding of language itself. In African metaphysics, words are not empty. They carry vibration, intention, and spiritual power. To speak a name is to call its prayer into being. To repeat it daily is to reaffirm the covenant embedded within it. A name becomes a mantra that echoes throughout a person's life, calling them back to the divine purpose spoken over them at the moment of their naming. Thus, the philosophy of names in Africa is not simply cultural, it is cosmic. It reveals a world where language shapes destiny, where identity is rooted in the divine, and where nothing, not even the sound of your name, is accidental. To understand African names is to understand that life itself is a sacred calling, and that every person carries within their name a reminder that they walk not alone, but under the guidance of God, ancestors, and destiny itself. Among the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria, names are deeply spiritual vessels that tie the individual to God, destiny, and the ancestors. To truly understand Igbo names, we must first step into their cosmology, where life is never seen as random and every person is born into the world with a divine spark called Chi. The concept of Chi is one of the most profound contributions of Igbo thought to African metaphysics. It refers to the personal spirit or guardian force assigned to each individual, a unique fragment of the divine that shapes a person's destiny. To the Igbo, your Chi is not separate from you. It is your spiritual double, walking with you, guiding your steps and ensuring that your life aligns with the larger will of creation. Because of this belief, names that invoke Chi are not mere labels, but prayers and affirmations of one's connection to destiny. Take, for instance, the name Chinonso, which means God is near. This name is a constant reminder that the divine presence is never far away, that the bearer of the name walks daily in companionship with their Chi and with Chukwu, the supreme God. Similarly, the name Chinyeri, meaning God gives, acknowledges that blessings, wealth, children, and every good thing come from God through the personal spirit that governs one's fate. Another powerful example is Chinweoke, meaning that which belongs to God. Such a name reminds both the bearer and the community that everything in life is ultimately a trust from the divine, not to be abused or taken for granted. The connection between Chi and Chukwu is essential here. While Chi represents the individual's personal destiny, Chukwu represents the ultimate source of all existence, the Great Spirit, the Supreme God of the Igbo. In fact, Chukwu literally means Chi Ukwu, the Great Chi, or the Supreme Spirit from which all other Chi emanates. This reveals profound theology. Every person's destiny, every fragment of the divine spark within them, ultimately flows from the same inexhaustible source. Names that invoke Chukwu are therefore invocations of the highest divine authority. A name like Chukwuemeka, meaning God has done great, celebrates divine intervention and testifies to the greatness of God's acts in the life of the family. Another name, Chukwudi, meaning there is God, affirms divine existence as an undeniable reality that governs all aspects of life. These names were not chosen lightly. In Igbo culture, naming ceremonies are acts of deep spiritual significance. Families often consulted diviners or elders to discern the destiny of a child and ensure that the name chosen aligned with the child's path. A name was believed to set the tone of life. To call a child Chidibere, God is merciful, was not simply to mark them with a beautiful phrase. It was to affirm over and over again that their life was under the mercy of God, that their steps would be protected by divine compassion. Each time the name was spoken, it renewed the contract between the individual and the divine. In everyday life, these names functioned as constant reminders of God's presence. When a mother calls her child Chinonso, she is not merely summoning them, she is proclaiming that God is near. When friends call someone Chukwuemeka, they are not just speaking a name but declaring that God has acted greatly. Thus, names became daily prayers, woven into the fabric of ordinary conversation. They ensured that no one could forget the divine because God was literally called upon every time a person's name was spoken aloud. This practice reveals a profound truth about Igbo spirituality. Faith was not confined to temples or shrines. It was embedded into the very language of the people. A child carried their theology with them, not in written scripture, but in the syllables of their own name. This integration of spirituality into identity meant that to bear a name was to carry a mission, to embody a spiritual truth, and to remind both oneself and others of the divine order that governs life. Moreover, Igbo names reinforced the collective memory of the people. Names often carried stories of survival, gratitude, or divine encounter. After overcoming hardship, a family might name a child Chukuma, meaning God knows, as a way of testifying that God alone understood the depth of their trials. After a long-awaited birth, another child might be named Chinagorom. God walks with me, affirming the divine companionship that sustained the family. These names preserved history, ensuring that personal and communal experiences were forever tied to the divine narrative. In this way, Igbo names were never isolated words but living archives of philosophy, theology, and history. They encapsulated the community's relationship with God, affirmed the individual's destiny, and created an unbroken dialogue between humans and the divine. To speak an Igbo name was to speak faith. To answer to an Igbo name was to step into a divine contract. And to live by an Igbo name was to embody a spiritual truth that transcended the individual and bound them to their people, their ancestors, and their God. Thus, in Igbo thought, names are far more than sounds. They are living invocations of destiny. They carry the presence of Chi, point always to Chukwu, and ensure that no person ever walks alone. Every time an Igbo name is spoken, it is a prayer, a testimony, and a reminder that life is governed not by chance, but by the divine hand that shapes all destinies. Among the Yoruba people of southwestern Nigeria and beyond, names are not arbitrary choices but deeply spiritual affirmations. To understand Yoruba names is to step into a worldview where God, known as Oluwa or Olodumare, reigns as the supreme source of all existence, while the Orisha, divine manifestations of God's power, act as intermediaries between the human and spiritual realms. This dual structure of the Yoruba cosmology, God as the transcendent source and the Orisha as accessible forces, has profoundly shaped the philosophy of naming. A name, in Yoruba thought, is not only an identity marker, but an invocation of divine presence and a constant reminder of the relationship between humanity and the spiritual order. The prefix Oluwa, meaning the Lord, is one of the most common features of Yoruba names. It reflects the people's understanding that life itself is sustained by God's will. To name a child Oluwatoyin, meaning the Lord is worthy of praise, is to embed into their very identity an eternal act of thanksgiving. Every time this name is spoken, it reinforces the duty to recognize God's goodness. Similarly, Oluwaseun, meaning the Lord is thankful, is not merely a phrase of gratitude but a permanent testimony. It declares that the child's existence is a gift and that the life itself is a song of thanks to the divine. Names like these ensure that the Yoruba do not forget their dependence on God. In a society where the spoken word is charged with power, a name is a daily invocation. Parents did not simply choose these names because they sounded pleasing, but because they carried weight. To call someone Oluwatoyin or Oluwaseun is to participate in a prayer to remind the community of God's central place in their lives and to keep gratitude alive in the consciousness of the people. Yet Yoruba spirituality is not solely focused on the transcendent figure of Oluwa. The Orisha occupy a central role in the daily religious life of the people, and their presence is also reflected in naming traditions. The Orisha are divine manifestations, each representing particular aspects of nature, morality, or human activity. They are not gods in themselves, but expressions of Olodumare's power, making divine energy more accessible to humans. Thus, names that invoke the Orisha are not deviations from the worship of God, but acknowledgements of the many ways God interacts with creation. For example, a name like Ifayemi, meaning Ifa suits me, connects the bearer to Ifa, the Orisha of divination and wisdom. This name not only affirms the individual's alignment with truth and destiny, but also calls upon the guidance of Ifa to direct the person's life. Another example is Esuyemi, meaning Esu fits me. Esu, often misunderstood in Western interpretations, is not the devil, but the divine messenger and trickster, the one who mediates between humans and the other Orisha. To bear a name invoking Esu is to acknowledge his indispensable role in communication with the divine, his ability to test human integrity, and his presence as a force of balance in the cosmos. Such names are not casual associations. They act as spiritual contracts, binding the individual to the divine forces they invoke. A child named Ifayemi is expected to grow in wisdom and discernment. A child named Esuyemi is understood to carry qualities of sharpness, adaptability, and spiritual awareness. Through these names, the Orisha are woven into the very fabric of personal identity, ensuring that the individual walks through life under the guardianship of divine powers. What makes Yoruba names especially profound is the way they embody both transcendence and immanence. On one hand, names beginning with Oluwa remind the community of the Supreme God, the source of all life. On the other hand, Orisha-related names highlight the immediacy of divine presence in specific aspects of life: wisdom, communication, fertility, protection, creativity. Together, they reflect a cosmology in which God is both far beyond human comprehension and intimately involved in human existence through the Orisha. Naming ceremonies among the Yoruba further reveal this layered understanding. Traditionally, a child is named on the 7th day after birth, in a ritual known as Isomo Loruko. During the ceremony, elders gather, libations are poured, and prayers are offered to God and the Orisha. The child is tasted with symbolic elements such as honey for sweetness, pepper for vitality, salt for preservation, and kola nut for wisdom. Each element is accompanied by prayers that the child's name will reflect the qualities being invoked. When the chosen name is finally spoken aloud, it becomes more than a designation. It becomes a living prayer sealed by the community and the divine. Through these practices, Yoruba names serve as daily invocations, functioning both as a spiritual compass and a shield. They remind the bearer of their responsibilities to God and community, while also calling upon divine forces for protection and guidance. A name is therefore never neutral. It is either strengthening the alignment between the individual and the divine order, or it risks being a burden if its meaning is ignored. This is why Yoruba parents take the naming process so seriously, consulting with elders, priests, and even diviners to ensure that the chosen name aligns with the child's destiny. In the end, Yoruba names reveal a philosophy where identity and spirituality cannot be separated. To call a child Oluwatoyin is to praise God with every utterance. To call someone Ifayemi is to affirm their connection to divine wisdom. These names are not just words, they are invocations, contracts, and shields woven into the daily lives of the people. Through them, the Yoruba demonstrate that every human being carries the divine not only in their spirit, but also in their very name. And in that name lies the power to remember, to invoke, and to live under the guidance of God and the Orisha alike. In the philosophy of the Akan people of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, names are not casual markers of identity, but sacred ties to the Creator, the earth, and the cosmic order. To understand the Akan names, one must first grasp the central place of Nyame, the supreme creator, and Asase Ya, the earth goddess, within their cosmology. For the Akan, Nyame is the source of all life, the giver of breath, the one who sustains the universe. Yet human existence is also inseparably bound to the earth, embodied by Asase Ya, the mother who nurtures, grounds, and receives all. Together, Nyame and Asase Ya form a spiritual balance between sky and earth, transcendence and immanence. Akan names in many cases function as daily reminders of this sacred duality, anchoring the individual within the divine rhythm of creation. One of the most distinctive features of Akan naming is the system of day names, where children are named according to the day or the week on which they are born. This practice reflects the Akan belief that time itself is sacred, that each day carries spiritual qualities shaped by Nyame and aligned with cosmic energies. A child born on Friday may be called Kofi if male or Afia if female, while one born on Saturday may be called Kwame or Ama. These names are not arbitrary. They place the child within the cosmic order, marking them as carriers of the spiritual qualities associated with that day. In this way, day names are not simply chronological tags, but invocations of the cosmic balance established by Nyame. Yet beyond day names, many Akan names directly invoke Nyame, embedding the Creator's presence into the lives of the people. A name such as Nyameke, gift of God, declares that life itself is a blessing from the Creator. Another, Nyameba, child of God, establishes divine parentage, reminding both the bearer and the community that every human life is sacred. Nyame, God is good, becomes a living testimony of divine benevolence. Through these names, Nyame is never far from the consciousness of the Akan. Every time these names are spoken, they renew the connection between the community and their creator. Asase Ya, the earth goddess, is also central to Akan naming. Known as the Great Mother, Asase Ya is honored as the foundation of life, fertility, and moral order. She is invoked not only for abundance and fertility, but also as the ultimate witness to truth. To swear falsely in her name is considered a grave offense. Some Akan names reflect this devotion to the earth and its balance. A child may be named Asase, carrying within them the strength and stability of the goddess. Others may bear names that connect them to the agricultural rhythms tied to Asase Ya, emphasizing humanity's dependence on the earth's generosity. What is most profound about Akan names is how they integrate cosmic, divine, and ancestral dimensions into a single identity. A day name like Kwame aligns an individual with time's cosmic rhythm. A divine name like Nyameke anchors them in gratitude to the Creator. An earth-centered name tied to Asase Ya grounds them in the soil of existence. Together, these names create a philosophy of balance between heaven and earth, between God and ancestors, between time and eternity. Naming ceremonies among the Akan reveal this worldview vividly. When a child is born, elders wait 8 days before publicly naming the infant. This delay is significant. It acknowledges that the child is not yet fully part of the community until the name has been aligned with both Nyame and Asase Ya. On the 8th day, prayers are offered, libations poured, and the child is presented to the earth, symbolically placing their life under the guardianship of the divine forces. Only then is the name spoken aloud, sealing the child's place within the cosmic order. These ceremonies reflect the Akan conviction that a name is not chosen lightly but is part of a larger spiritual contract. The child is seen not only as an individual but as a link in a chain of ancestral continuity, carrying the prayers, hopes, and divine blessings of generations before them. The name becomes a compass, orienting them toward a life that honors both Nyame and Asase Ya, the balance of sky and earth, spirit, and matter. Through these practices, Akan names embody a philosophy where identity is cosmic, where every person is placed within a sacred rhythm of time, and where every name echoes the voices of Creator and Earth Mother. To bear an Akan name is to live daily in the awareness that life is a divine gift, that existence is bound to the soil, and that destiny itself is shaped by the cosmic harmony of Nyame and Asase Ya. Among the Yu and Fon peoples of West Africa, the cosmology of names is inseparable from the profound theology of Mawu-Lisa, the dual divinity that represents the balance of male and female, day and night, sun and moon. Unlike traditions that place God in a singular form, Vodun philosophy emphasizes complementarity and interdependence. Mawu is the female aspect associated with the moon, coolness, rest, and nurturing. Lisa is the male counterpart linked to the sun, heat, activity, and strength. Together they form a complete whole, the divine principle that sustains creation. In this worldview, a name is not just a marker of individuality, but an invocation of this cosmic duality. A reminder that life is balanced when opposites are harmonized. Names that invoke Mawu or Lisa are prayers of alignment with this cosmic balance. A child may be called Mawuli, meaning God exists, where Mawu is explicitly recognized as a divine source of life. Another example is Mawunyo, meaning God is good, which affirms divine benevolence as the guiding force of existence. These names do not simply identify the child, they testify to the reality of God and inscribe divine presence into the fabric of daily life. Every time someone calls child Mawuli, they are reaffirming the existence of God in their community. And every time Mawunyo is spoken, they are renewing the testimony of divine goodness. Other names reflect the dual principle more directly. A child may be named in ways that acknowledge balance and harmony, embodying the Vodun understanding that one-sidedness cannot sustain life. Just as the sun must yield to the moon and day must give way to night, human life must remain balanced. Names such as Mawus, God hears, carry this resonance, suggesting that the divine not only creates but also listens, embodying both authority and compassion. These names reflect the dual qualities of Mawu-Lisa: power combined with gentleness, justice infused with mercy, strength coupled with care. Naming ceremonies among the Yue and Fon emphasize the same philosophy of duality. Families consult diviners, priests, or elders to discern the destiny of the child, and names are chosen with great care to reflect divine will. Libations are poured, offerings are made, and the name is spoken aloud as a contract binding the child to the cosmic order. The name does not merely identify the child, it embeds them into a spiritual framework where male and female energies, sun and moon, spirit and matter remain in balance. This ensures that the child grows up with an identity that constantly reminds them of harmony, responsibility, and divine presence. Names in Vodun tradition also serve as moral compasses. They remind the bearer and the community of the ethical responsibilities that come with invoking God. A name like Mawuli is not just a declaration, but also a call to live in accordance with the truth it proclaims. If God exists, then life must reflect divine order. If Mawunyo, God is good, then one must strive to embody goodness in action. Thus, names operate both as invocations of divine power and as guides for moral living, ensuring that individuals grow into the ideals their names proclaim. What makes Vodun names especially profound is the emphasis on continuity. They not only honor the duality of Mawu-Lisa, but also ensure that this divine principle is carried from one generation to the next. Children bear names that their ancestors once carried, linking them to a chain of invocation that stretches back centuries. In this way, names are more than personal identifiers. They are vessels of cultural memory and theological truth. To call a child by their Vodun name is to speak the wisdom of the ancestors and to affirm the divine balance that governs the cosmos. Through these practices, the Yui and Fon demonstrate that names are cosmic in scope. They capture the essence of Mawu-Lisa, affirm the presence of God in daily life, and remind each generation of the importance of balance. In this sense, Vodun names are not simply spiritual expressions, but living philosophies, prayers that shape identity, destiny, and morality. To carry such a name is to carry the divine balance of creation itself, walking daily as a living testimony of the unity of opposites and the eternal truths that harmony is the foundation of life. In the spiritual universe of the Congo people, names are profound testimonies of faith, destiny, and divine authority. At the heart of this cosmology stands Nzambi Mpungu, the supreme God, the creator and sustainer of all life. To the Congo, Nzambi is both transcendent and immanent, the source of all power yet present in the rhythms of daily existence. Names that invoke Nzambi are never empty words. They are affirmations of divine sovereignty, reminders that human life is inseparably bound to the will of the Creator. In this way, every time such a name is spoken, the community reaffirms its connection to the highest power of existence. Congo cosmology is deeply concerned with the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. To the people, existence is not linear but circular, moving across realms of the visible and the invisible. The physical world is only one dimension of life, while the spirit world, the realm of the ancestors, is another. These two dimensions are not separated but interconnected, forming a continuum through which the human soul journeys. This belief is symbolized in the cosmogram, a sacred cross within a circle that maps the passage of the sun and the soul, birth at sunrise, maturity at midday, death at sunset, and rebirth at midnight. Names in Congo tradition reflect this worldview, anchoring individuals in the eternal rhythm of creation, death, and renewal under the guidance of Nzambi. Many Congo names directly invoke the authority of Nzambi. A child may be called Nzambi, carrying within their identity the reminder of God's presence. Other names include Nzambilu, meaning God's blessing, or Nzambimuna, meaning God's child. Each of these names functions as a living prayer. affirming that the individual's existence is under divine guardianship. Another example is Nzambifumu, which translates as God is King. Such a name not only glorifies the supremacy of Nzambi, but also establishes a moral framework for life, reminding both the bearer and the community that earthly rulers are secondary to divine authority. Beyond direct invocations of Nzambi, Congo names often embody the cycle of life and the moral expectations tied to it. Names may declare gratitude for life, humility before God, or recognition of divine justice. They may commemorate a difficult birth, a miraculous survival, or a season of abundance attributed to divine providence. For example, a name given after the safe recovery of a child from illness might proclaim that it was Nzambi who restored life, embedding the testimony of divine intervention into the family's memory. In this way, names serve as historical records of faith, transforming personal experiences into collective affirmations of God's power. The role of naming ceremonies in Congo tradition further reveals this connection between identity and cosmology. When a child is born, elders and priests perform rituals to align the child's spirit with the will of Nzambi and the ancestral order. Offerings may be made and prayers spoken to ensure that the chosen name resonates with the child's destiny. The spoken name is not only a designation but a spiritual shield, placing the child under the watchful eyes of Nzambi and the protection of the ancestors. In Congo, understanding to bear a name invoking Nzambi is to carry a piece of divine energy, ensuring that the individual walks through life with spiritual authority and protection. This philosophy also shaped the resilience of the Congo people during the colonial period and the Atlantic slave trade. Even when forced into new lands and stripped of many freedoms, enslaved Africans carried their spiritual worldview within their names. Names invoking Nzambi persisted as a form of resistance, a refusal to forget the supreme God who governed life beyond the power of colonizers. In this way, names became both survival strategies and spiritual declarations, holding on to the memory of freedom and the sovereignty of Nzambi even in the darkest times. Through these practices, we see that Congo names are more than cultural identifiers. They are theological statements, cosmological maps, and historical testimonies. They declare that life is sacred, that death is not an end but a passage, and that every destiny is ultimately in the hands of Nzambi. To bear a Congo name tied to the Creator is to carry a living reminder that no matter the trials of existence, the cycle continues, and God's authority remains supreme. In this way, names bind individuals to the eternal rhythm of life, death, and rebirth, ensuring that every generation walks with faith, memory, and divine protection. In the spiritual traditions of the Zulu people of Southern Africa, names embody reverence, power, and divine connection. At the center of Zulu theology is Nkulunkulu, often translated as the Great Great One. This title captures both transcendence and intimacy, describing a being who is not only the origin of all existence but also the sustaining force present in the lives of the people. To the Zulu, Nkulunkulu is both the first ancestor and the supreme deity, the one from whom life flows and to whom all life returns. Names invoking Nkulunkulu are therefore never casual. They are sacred declarations that place the bearer under divine guardianship and align their life with the power of the cosmic source. Zulu cosmology emphasizes respect, authority, and the continuity of life through the ancestors. In this worldview, the ancestors are not gone but remain active participants in the affairs of the living. They stand as mediators between humanity and Nkulunkulu, ensuring that prayers and rituals ascend to the divine. This layered structure of spiritual authority is reflected in the way names are chosen and spoken. A Zulu name is not just about individuality, it is about situating a person within the larger order of the community, the ancestors, and the divine. To carry a name invoking Nkulunkulu is to be constantly reminded of this sacred order. One of the most well-known examples is the name Nkosinati, which translates as "the Lord is with us." This name is both a prayer and a declaration. It assures the bearer and the community that they do not walk alone, that the divine presence surrounds them in times of trial and joy alike. To call someone Nkosinati is to affirm that God is actively involved in the affairs of humanity, offering protection, guidance, and companionship. The name becomes a shield, a daily reminder that even in hardship, the Lord is present. Other Zulu names reflect similar invocations of respect and power. A name such as Nkosi Kona, "the Lord is here," makes a bold statement of divine immediacy, affirming that the community is never abandoned. Nkosi Nhlanhla, meaning "the Lord is our fortune," connects prosperity and blessing directly to divine providence. These names are not mere wishes but firm declarations rooted in faith. They operate as contracts of trust between the individual, their family, and Nkulunkulu, shaping how the bearer understands their place in the world. The power of these names also lies in their ability to cultivate humility and responsibility. To bear a name that invokes Nkulunkulu is to live under the constant awareness that one's life is sacred, that one is accountable to forces greater than oneself. Such names guide moral conduct, reminding the bearer that they carry divine presence in their identity. To dishonor the name is to dishonor the divine. Thus, names become not only shields of protection but also compasses of behavior, ensuring that individuals live with respect for community, ancestors, and God. Naming ceremonies in Zulu culture reveal the seriousness of this practice. Families often consult elders and sometimes diviners to discern the appropriate name for a child. The choice is guided not by fashion or convenience but by the circumstances of birth, the hopes of the family, and the perceived destiny of the child. A name tied to Nkulunkulu is chosen when there is a sense of divine intervention, such as a long-awaited birth, survival through difficulty, or a moment of communal gratitude. By embedding the divine into the child's name, the family ensures that the child's entire life remains under the protective shadow of the Great Great One. The resilience of these names has carried into modern times. Even in urban settings and among Christianized communities, Zulu names invoking God remain central, revealing the continuity of indigenous theology. Names such as Nkosinati are not seen as relics of the past but as living testimonies of faith. They speak of a worldview in which the divine is not distant but present, not abstract but personal, shaping the destiny of individuals and communities alike. Through these traditions, we see that Zulu names are far more than cultural identifiers. They are daily prayers, sacred contracts, and spiritual shields. To call a child Nkosinati is to declare that God is with them. To call them Nkosikona is to affirm that God is here. To name them Nkosi Nhlanhla is to recognize divine providence in their fortunes. Each name situates the individual within the larger order of community, ancestors, and Nkulunkulu, ensuring that their life unfolds in harmony with cosmic authority. In this way, Zulu names stand as powerful affirmations of respect, divine presence, and the unbreakable bond between humanity and the Great Great One. In the land of Kemet, known today as ancient Egypt, names carried a spiritual weight that extended far beyond the individual. They were not only personal identifiers, but sacred contracts with the gods woven into the very fabric of divine kingship and cosmic order. To speak a name in Kemet was to invoke power, to summon the presence of deities, and to affirm the divine authority that sustained both the individual and the nation. Among all the African traditions of naming, Kemet stands out for the grandeur with which names tied humans, especially kings, to the eternal powers of Ra, Amun, Isis, Osiris, and the great pantheon of gods. At the center of this theology stood Ra, the sun god, the bringer of light, order, and life. As the source of creation and the one who traveled across the sky each day in his solar bark, Ra was a god of constant renewal. To be named after Ra was to be marked by divine radiance, to carry the essence of light itself. Pharaohs often took names such as Rameses, which means born of Ra. This was not a poetic flourish, but a declaration of divine descent, linking the ruler's authority to the eternal power of the sun. Each time the name was spoken, it affirmed that the king was not a mere human sovereign, but a child of the divine, destined to rule under cosmic mandate. Alongside Ra, Amun rose to prominence, especially during the New Kingdom. Amun represented the hidden, mysterious aspect of divinity, the force unseen yet omnipresent. When combined with Ra, he became Amun-Ra, the god who was both hidden and revealed, transcendent and immanent. Pharaohs such as Tutankhamun carried this divine connection in their names. His name, meaning living image of Amun, was more than identity. It was a theological statement. It declared that the king's very life was an incarnation of divine presence, that to see the ruler was, in some sense, to see the god himself. Names in Kemet were not chosen at random, especially among royalty. They were carefully constructed contracts proclaiming the bond between ruler and deity. A king's name was his legitimacy, the anchor of his kingship. Without divine connection, no ruler could stand. By embedding Ra or Amun into their names, pharaohs established the right to govern not through human inheritance alone, but through the will of the gods. The people, upon hearing such names, were reminded that their ruler was chosen by the divine order, a living bridge between the earthly kingdom and the eternal heavens. This philosophy of naming extended beyond kings. Priests, officials, and common people also bore names tied to gods and goddesses, ensuring that divine presence permeated every level of society. Names invoking Isis carried the grace of motherhood and protection. Those tied to Osiris reflected themes of resurrection and eternal life. Names invoking Hathor, goddess of love and music, celebrated beauty, fertility, and joy. Through these names, individuals aligned themselves with particular divine qualities, ensuring that their identities carried spiritual force. The metaphysics of naming in Kemet also reveals the understanding of immortality. The Egyptians believed that to erase someone's name was to destroy their afterlife, for the name was the vessel of the soul's memory. Conversely, to preserve and speak a name was to keep a person alive forever. This is why tombs, temples, and monuments were inscribed with names, ensuring that generations to come would call them aloud and sustain their eternal existence. Names thus became spiritual technologies of survival, guaranteeing not only divine connection in life, but continuity beyond death. This deeper reverence for names as sacred contracts did not die with Kemet, but reverberated through later African cultures. The idea that rulers derived legitimacy from divine invocation appears among the Yoruba, where kings are seen as earthly representatives of the Orisha. Among the Akan, day names and divine titles embed individuals into cosmic order, reflecting a worldview not unlike that of Kemet. In the Congo and Zulu traditions, names tied to supreme gods like Nzambi or Nkulunkulu echo the Egyptian conviction that identity must always be grounded in divine authority. Even the Igbo concept of Chi resonates with the Egyptian understanding that every person carries a divine spark within them, a reflection of the great source of life. The endurance of these traditions across Africa is not coincidence but continuity. When a Yoruba child is called Oluwatoyin, when an Igbo child is called Chukwuemeka, or when an Akan child is named Nyamekie, they stand in the same current of thought that once gave rise to names like Rameses, Tutankhamun. All proclaim that life and destiny flow from God, that identity is a contract with divine power, and that to bear a name is to walk daily under spiritual authority. Thus, the names of Kemet reveal more than history. They reveal a philosophy of life, kingship, and destiny that unites Africa's diverse traditions. To call a king Rameses was to declare him born of Ra. To call a child Tutankhamun was to proclaim them a living image of Amun. And to preserve those names was to ensure that divine authority remained woven into the fabric of existence. In this way, names in Kemet were not just sounds, but sacred texts, prayers, and contracts, shaping not only the fate of individuals but the destiny of nations. When we step back and look across the vast landscape of Africa, from the Nile Valley of Kemet to the forests of Igbo land, from the Yoruba kingdoms to the Akan shrines, from the Vodun traditions of the Fon and Yu to the Congo Basin and the Zulu plains, one truth becomes clear. Names are never ordinary. They are living prayers, binding each individual to God, to the ancestors, and to destiny itself. Each tradition may speak with different tongues. Ra, Amun, Chi, Chukwu, Oluwa, Orisha, Nyame, Asaseya, Nzambi, Nkulunkulu, Mawu-Lisa. But together they reveal a unified African philosophy where names are sacred invocations of divine presence. In Igbo thought, the name carries the power of Chi, the personal spirit, and of Chukwu, the great god. In Yoruba tradition, names call upon Oluwa and the Orisha, ensuring that daily life is lived under divine guardianship. Among the Akan, names reflect the cosmic order of time, the gifts of Nyame, and the grounding power of Asaseya. For the Vodun peoples, names embody the duality of Mawu-Lisa, balancing male and female, sun and moon. The Congo people declare in their names that life flows through Nzambi, and that existence is a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The Zulu affirm through their names that Nkulunkulu, the great one, is always present, guiding and protecting. And in Kemet, names tied to Ra and Amun were contracts of kingship, anchoring rulers and people alike in divine authority. Though the languages differ, the philosophy is the same. Names are more than identity markers. They are contracts, covenants, and prayers. They remind the bearer of their sacred duty, align them with divine power, and ensure that every utterance of their name is an invocation of spirit. This unbroken thread of African metaphysics teaches us that the divine is not distant, but near, present in every syllable spoken over a child, every name preserved across generations. To see all these traditions together is to realize that Africa has always known the power of the word. A name is a seed of destiny, a shield of protection, a testimony of faith. It is the bridge between the visible and the invisible, the temporal and the eternal. Across centuries and cultures, this truth remains unchanged. In Africa, names are sacred, and through them, the voice of God and the ancestors continues to echo. Names in Africa have never been mere words. They are philosophy, distilling profound truths about God, destiny, and community into a single identity. They are science, revealing an ancient understanding of vibration, sound, and cosmic law that aligns the human spirit with divine order. And they are living memory, carrying the wisdom of ancestors across generations, ensuring that no one forgets where they come from or who walks with them. A name is history spoken aloud. A name is prayer embodied. A name is the reminder that we are more than flesh. We are spirit clothed in sound. In our time, when many of these traditions have been forgotten or reduced to curiosities, it is more important than ever to reclaim the ancestral meaning of names. To call yourself Chinonso is to affirm that God is near. To be named Oluwasiun is to declare that the Lord deserves thanks. To bear the name Nyamekie is to remember that your life is a gift. To answer to Mawuli is to testify that God exists. These names are not relics of the past. They are living compasses guiding us back to identity, dignity, and spiritual grounding. By reclaiming the meaning of names, we reconnect with the power our ancestors knew, that the words shape reality, and that the name we carry is the first prophecy spoken over our lives. So here is the call to you. Like this video if you believe names carry ancestral power and divine purpose. Comment your own name and its meaning so together we can create a living archive of African wisdom right here. And subscribe to this channel for more journeys into the sacred knowledge of our ancestors, knowledge that still breathes and speaks today. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for walking with me through this journey into the spiritual meaning of African names. Your presence here is part of the living memory we are reclaiming. May your name always remind you of your destiny, your ancestors, and your God.
May the spirits guide and protect us through this sacred ritual.